Daniel Sports Central being over next team projection of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Texas A&M Aggies, a team that's certainly had an outstanding 2020 season, as this team went 9-1 overall. Just an outstanding year for Texas A&M, as this team was one of the better teams in the SEC last year, and I can easily see that happening once again in 2021, and why that is what we're going over here today. We're also going to be over a few players that Texas A&M will be losing, who they're going to be returning, and also looking at their schedule for the first time this offseason, starting out with the previous 6 games for the Aggies. And this team down the stretch only improved. Like, if you look at them at the start of the season in comparison to them at the end of the season, like, Texas A&M really improved a ton over the course of 2020. Like, just looking at some of those wins that they had at the end of the year, they beat Arkansas 42-31. That was one of their more sloppy games, I'd say. I mean, Arkansas was a pretty good team last season, so I wouldn't say that was a terrible win there, but they did beat South Carolina 48-3. Impressive win there. They also beat LSU 20-7. And of course, LSU last season actually was kind of in a similar situation to Texas A&M. They kind of started a little bit slow there, but LSU improved a ton over the season, so that was a good win there against LSU. They also beat Auburn on the road 31-20, and then they beat Tennessee 34-13, and that was before beating North Carolina in their bowl game by a score of 41-27. That especially was a very impressive win by Texas A&M against North Carolina. North Carolina last season was a really good team, and especially with Sam Howell and all that they got going down there. I mean, for Texas A&M, they played very well in that matchup, so all around, a very great season for Texas A&M. They were 4-1 in their first 5 games. Their only loss last season was actually to Alabama. They played them in week number 2, and that was the only loss that Texas A&M had. They were 5-0 in the last 5 games, so this team really did improve, I would say, over the course of 2020. Looking at your roster preview for next season, you do lose your starting quarterback, Kellen Mond. That's going to be a tough loss there. And the main factor for Texas A&M as to whether or not this team will be successful is whether or not their quarterback is good. If Haynes King can play up to the level that Kellen Mond did, this team will be just fine next season, possibly even better next year than they were this year. But if you look at Kellen Mond here, he put up 2,200 yards last year, 19 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, also had a 63% completion rate. So Kellen Mond overall was a great quarterback last season. I'd say he's also extremely underrated. Like, if you look at him over the course of the past couple of seasons, like 2 seasons, 3 seasons, like, Kellen Mond has improved a ton, and he's played very well and very consistently over the last few years. So for Kellen Mond, he's going to be a pretty tough loss for Texas A&M. But if Haynes King is able to take over and do just as good of a job as Kellen Mond did, I think Texas A&M once again will be just fine there. But Isaiah Spiller, they return him. That's going to be a huge return. He put up over 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns last year. Isaiah Spiller is a person to really watch out for next season. He's going to be an outstanding running back. I'd say he's going to be one of the better ones in the SEC for sure, so watch out for him. Aeneas Smith is also coming back. If you look at him last year, put up over 100 yards and then 10 touchdowns as well. And then, of course, they got Jalen Weidermeyer. He's also coming back to this team. That's going to be a huge return there at the tight end position, as he put up just over 500 yards and 6 touchdowns. So that's going to be huge for this team. So really, I mean, if you look at the receiving core over Texas A&M, they were highly relying on their tight end quite a bit. They do have a couple of top wide receivers here with Chase Lane, but Chase Lane didn't have a big impact on this team. It put up just over 400 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he was the main wide receiver that had an impact on this team. Hezekiah Jones is the other receiver on this team, who put up just under 200 yards last season. So really, the receiving core is not losing a whole lot there as well. So all around, the skill players position for Texas A&M is looking excellent. The only question mark, I'd say, with the skill players next season will be in the quarterback position, and whether or not Haynes King or whichever quarterback is under center can perform up to the level of Kellen Mond or even past that. So definitely something to watch out for there. They do lose 3 offensive linemen. That was definitely a big concern with this team next season, especially considering they're going to have a younger quarterback. That's the main concern here, is their offensive line is going to be more of a younger group next season. They do lose 2 linebackers, 1 defensive lineman as well, so the defense does lose 3 starters, which is kind of right around average. Most defenses lose 3 to 4 starters per off season, so really for Texas A&M, they're not losing a whole lot there. Defensive side looks excellent for this team, especially in the secondary. This secondary is going to be great next season. They're going to be extremely improved. Really watch out for that secondary position next season for Texas A&M. Could the Aggies beat Alabama out? Is going to be a huge question for many Texas A&M fans. And the main thing is, I mean, Texas A&M, they were easily a playoff team last season. They just can't ever get past Alabama. Alabama is just too big of a dynasty right now to get past. And, I mean, it must be frustrating for Texas A&M. I mean, this team is always performing at very high levels. They just can't ever make it to the college ball playoff because they always have to get through Alabama to get there. And I can understand why that's so frustrating because, I mean, Alabama is so good and they've been so good for such a long time. Texas A&M, though, I mean, they got a big mountain to climb if they're going to be better than Alabama. I mean, Alabama they just have such great recruiting year in, year out. They got so much depth on both sides of the ball. They're going to be a tough team to beat out, especially for Texas A&M. I mean, Texas A&M is definitely worthy of it. I think that there's a good chance we do see Texas A&M be right up there in the second position for the SEC West. Honestly, it's kind of a battle between Texas A&M and LSU for that position next year, but definitely, I mean, Texas A&M, they're going to be a tough team to beat next season. Definitely a team to watch out for. I'd say Texas A&M is a big dark horse as well going into next season. I could see this team definitely putting up a pretty good fight in the SEC to be one of the top teams in the conference. But chances of a playoff appearance, that kind of relates to the previous question about the Aggies and Alabama. If they can get past Alabama, this team will be in the college football playoff, obviously. I mean, even if they're a one-loss team, and if they can get past Alabama, this team I could easily still see going onto the college football playoff because, I mean, that puts them in the position in the SEC championship. So, I mean, yeah, Texas A&M, they just got to get past Alabama, and I think this team will be in the college football playoff, but that's going to be a pretty tough task to do considering Alabama's got such great depth going into next season. But looking at your schedule, start off the season with a game against Kent State. Should be a pretty easy game there to start off your season. Then you got a road trip to Colorado. That's actually a former Big 12 matchup there between both those teams. Of course, Texas A&M and Colorado used to be in the Big 12 a few years back. So that should be a fun matchup there. Colorado is a team to watch out for. I mean, this team really surprised a lot of people, including myself, last season. And considering how young they were last season, Colorado is a team to watch out for. New Mexico, then of course you got them on September 18th. You got Arkansas in a neutral location. I believe that game is in Dallas, in AT&T Stadium. Then you got Mississippi State. You got Alabama. So all around, I mean, the first half of your schedule is pretty difficult towards the end of it. I mean, Arkansas, that could be an interesting matchup. I think I definitely favor Texas A&M right now, but that Alabama matchup, definitely the one to mark on your calendars. As for the second half of your season, you got Missouri on the road, you got South Carolina, Auburn, you got Ole Miss on the road. That could be an interesting matchup. Then you got Prairie View, A&M, and then LSU to finish out your season on the road. So all around for Texas A&M, this isn't a terrible schedule, not the worst one in the SEC that I've seen so far, but I mean, you have to play Alabama, you do have to play Auburn and LSU, so all three of those teams are going to be tough teams to beat. But overall, your crossover games into the SEC East Division are not that bad. I mean, you don't have to play Florida, you don't have to play Georgia, so those are definitely two very good signs. If you had to play Florida or Georgia, this would be a brutal schedule. But for Texas A&M, this is a team that I've noticed over the past few years that has had a lot of tough schedules, and that has had a huge impact on this team, I can guarantee you. Like, they've had to play Florida and Georgia and all them. It's been tough for Texas A&M over the past few years, but I think they actually get a break this year. That is definitely something to watch out for there. But as for the first half of your schedule, I think Kent State's going to be a win. New Mexico is also going to be a win. I think that Colorado game, I'd probably favor the Aggies right now to win that matchup, but I'm going to keep it as a yellow game for now. I just think with Colorado, that is a very tough team to predict next season. I could see Colorado either being really good or really bad. There's going to be a big record range on them next season, especially considering, I mean, they were a big surprise team last year, but I'm going to keep it as a yellow game for now. New Mexico will be a win. Arkansas is going to be a win. Mississippi State's also going to be a win. So I've got you getting at least 4 wins in your first 5 games. Alabama, I probably favor the Crimson Tide in that matchup right now, but I mean, it is in Texas A&M, so definitely watch out for that there. Texas A&M is always a brutal place to play, especially at nighttime. So if it is a night game, watch out for the Aggies. That could come to be a major upset. But Alabama, I'm going to keep it as a yellow game for now. So you, in your first 6 games, I'm expecting at least 4 wins for sure. I could easily see 5 in those first 6 games. As for the second half, that Missouri game, I'm going to put it as a close game for now, mainly because it's after a brutal game against Alabama, and it's also on the road. So I'm going to keep that one as a close one for now. South Carolina is going to be a win. Auburn's going to be a close one. Ole Miss is also going to be a close one. Ole Miss actually quietly had an outstanding 2020 season. This team made it, of course, to the Outback Bowl where they beat Indiana. I understand the Hoosiers were injured there, but Ole Miss, I mean, they had a pretty good end to the season in 2020. Prairie View A&M is going to be a win, and then, of course, LSU to finish out the season is going to be a close one as well. So I've got you getting, it looks like, 6 guaranteed wins next season. 6 guaranteed wins for sure, and I could easily see this team going way beyond that. Projection for next season is going to be 10-2 for Texas A&M. Your ceiling, or the best that you can ever get, is going to be 11-1, and then of course the floor, being the worst that you could do, is 8-4. So overall, looking like a great season for Texas A&M coming up. I definitely think Texas A&M will take at least 1 loss down the stretch. Not quite sure who that's going to be against, whether it's Alabama or Auburn or LSU or some team like that. But I do expect Texas A&M to take one loss down the stretch. I just think it's kind of inevitable, especially when you're in the SEC conference, which is always a very difficult conference. But once again, projection will be 10-2 for Texas A&M next season. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, though, on the Aggies. Let me know your record predictions, all of that down in the comments. I appreciate you guys all watching, though. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central, and I'll see you guys all later.